Joe Biden is stealing America's liberties. That's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt. And I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. And here we are, rounding to the end of the year, and it seems to me as if we have lost more individual freedoms under this president Joe Biden, than we've lost in a very long time. I know under Barack Obama, there were a lot of lost constitutional freedoms for American citizens because Barack Obama, of course, was the president, if you recall, who bragged about having a cell phone and pen. And so, in other words, who needs Congress? Who needs the normal legislative process, which takes into consideration the people's will and brings with it accountability, right? But Barack Obama, as bad as he was about stealing individual liberties and infringing upon citizens' God-given rights, Joe Biden has done a lot more in damage. And my guest today, Jonathan Emord, he is a constitutional attorney and a best-selling author. He has written most recently a great book called The Authoritarians. But even more recently than that, he has this new sort of lighthearted but serious look at what Joe Biden's administration has done to America. It's called How Biden Stole Christmas, Hanukkah, and Kwanzaa Too. He'll be on in the second segment to discuss that and his findings and his analysis about all the problems that this administration has contributed to in this country. But first, I want to give a quick heads up. If you are a regular listener to Bold and Blunt, first off, thank you. Thank you for your support. I truly appreciate it. And more than that, I'm humbled by it. I'm humbled that you, the listener, would actually think that Bold and Blunt is worthy of listening to. I know there are a lot of podcasts out there, so honestly, I am genuinely appreciative that you have chosen to listen to Bold and Blunt. And I just want to let you know that if you are not a subscriber to Bold and Blunt, you can do so at WashingtonTimes.com. Just find my hyperlinked name and click on it. And there are directions at the bottom of my commentaries on how to subscribe to my 3 times a week newsletter, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, in which is contained my twice weekly Bold and Blunt podcasts that come out on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Or you can go to WashingtonTimes.com and scroll down to the podcast link at the top of the page and click on Bold and Blunt. But also, you can go to edify.app/podcasts and find Bold and Blunt there among the lineup of all the great faith-based podcasts that Edify has to offer. So check it out. Check out Bold and Blunt at Edify. Check out all the other faith-based podcasts at Edify. And once again, if you're a regular listener, thank you so much. So Joe Biden, I want you to listen to this most recent statement Joe Biden has made regarding the coronavirus vaccines and the coronavirus vaccine mandates that his administration continues to push in defiance, not just in opposition, in outright defiance to sound science. Listen to this.
So this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. The unvaccinated, not the vaccinated, the unvaccinated. That's the problem. And so everybody talks about freedom and not to have a shot or have a test. Well, guess what? So how about patriotism? How about making sure that you're vaccinated so you do not spread the disease to anybody else? What about that? What's the big deal? What's the big deal of having to take a test once a week to know you can show up to work and you're not causing other people to get sick?
Lies, lies, and more lies. And at this point in time, Joe Biden, President Joe Biden, the president of our country, the president of the free world, is pushing a lie knowingly. Why do I say that? Why do I say that Joe Biden is making these statements knowing full well that they're lies? Why do I say that he is outright knowingly lying instead of just making mistakes? Well, he made those remarks just this week in an interview with a local television crew in Ohio. And that's after months and months and months of scientists, researchers, even Anthony Fauci, for crying out loud, and none other than our own Centers for Disease and Control. You know, the government bureaucracy that we're told to listen to this entire coronavirus crazy time. We're constantly told, listen to the CDC. This is after the CDC has been reporting for months and months this. Just go to the CDC coronavirus webpage and you can read it yourself. But I'm going to read excerpts from the CDC's page, What We Know About Vaccine Breakthrough Infections. And you can decide for yourself if Joe Biden is lying or just making a simple mistake. Anyhow, from the page, quote, vaccine breakthrough infections are expected. Did you hear that? Vaccine breakthrough infections are expected. COVID-19 vaccines are effective at preventing most infections. However, like other vaccines, they are not 100% effective. Do you think Joe Biden knows that? I think he does. I think he knows it, and he doesn't care, because his message is to get the vaccination at all costs. His message is that if you're not vaccinated, then you are unpatriotic. You are not doing your good American citizen duty. Back to the CDC page. Fully vaccinated people with a vaccine breakthrough infection are less likely to develop serious illness than those who are unvaccinated and get COVID-19. But, listen to this, even when fully vaccinated people develop symptoms, they tend to be less severe symptoms than in unvaccinated people. This means they are much less likely to be hospitalized or die than people who are not vaccinated. And here is the money quote, people who get vaccine breakthrough infections can be contagious. Even the CDC is reporting that. So how could it be that vaccinated people can still spread the coronavirus, can still spread COVID-19 to other people, and yet Joe Biden thinks that those who are not vaccinated are un-American, not doing their good American civil duties? Here's another quote from another page on the CDC's coronavirus section. Persons with asymptomatic or mild cases of vaccine breakthrough infections may not seek testing or medical care. And thus, these types of vaccine breakthrough cases may be underrepresented in the CDC system. Did you get that? So, once again, if you're vaccinated, you may still get the coronavirus. You may still pass the coronavirus or COVID-19 on to other people. But because you and the people that you pass this virus on to may not feel sick, of course you're not going to run and get tested. So chances are these so-called breakthrough cases are much higher than what's being reported, because only in an insane world, which is what America has become under the coronavirus, under this Joe Biden administration, only in an insane world do healthy people go seeking out illnesses. Only in an insane world do healthy people run to doctors' offices and clinics and physicians and beg to be tested for this disease, that disease. You know, that used to be called a disease in itself. It used to be called a psychological disorder called hypochondria, right? Only those people who were so worried about catching this and that from doorknobs and tabletops and riding subway systems, only those types of people would constantly wear gloves and dust off seats before they sit down and run to their doctors, and every time they had a cough, every time they had a breathing difficulty, every time they sneezed. The hypochondriacs of the world are now running Joe Biden White House policy on the coronavirus. But here's the worst thing. I truly don't think that the Joe Biden administration's team of coronavirus clampdown policymakers are so concerned about the health of the American public as they are concerned about exerting authorities over the American public using the coronavirus as justification. How else to explain Joe Biden's insistence that what's going on now with the spread of the coronavirus is due entirely to the unvaccinated people. He said, this is a quote, "Those who aren't vaccinated are the ones that continue to spread the diseases." And so we should think of vaccination, that's the context, as this is what he said, a patriotic duty. Not true. Outright false. And at this stage of the coronavirus game, when the science is clear, when the science from the very CDC that the bureaucrats in Joe Biden's White House keep referring the American citizens to look to and rely on for coronavirus policy, even that organization is reporting that what Joe Biden just said is completely untrue. I find it hard to believe that Joe Biden does not know this. I find it hard to believe that anybody out there at this point in time claiming that if you are unvaccinated, that you are the sole cause for the spread of the coronavirus. I find it unbelievable that that type of person who makes those types of statements aren't doing so because they have an ulterior partisan political motive. There's too much known now about the coronavirus to pretend that saying those who are unvaccinated are the cause of the coronavirus spread. There's too much out there proving otherwise that shows those who say otherwise are doing so because they are highly political and, let's put it out there bluntly, they're tyrants. They want to take this coronavirus and use it for their own selfish, political, power-hungry ambitions. Let me just read you some quick headlines, all from this week that proves even further that there's no way Joe Biden could not know what he said was a false statement. From Boston 25 News, COVID-19 updates. Total breakthrough cases in Massachusetts eclipse 100,000. Another one, similar headline, from an NBC 10 local station in Massachusetts. Breakthrough cases in Massachusetts top 100,000, over 5 million fully vaccinated. So it's not just like 0.000000001 breakthrough cases, right? 100,000 breakthrough cases, 100,000 fully vaccinated people in Massachusetts turned up positive for the coronavirus anyhow. And that, remember, is probably underreported because most people who are vaccinated don't continue to get tested. Not just Massachusetts. Well, let me read from the Boston Globe, another headline. This gives more specific numbers. Massachusetts reports 11,431 new breakthrough COVID-19 cases. This is just this week. So another 11,000 plus new cases in Massachusetts from fully vaccinated people. Breakthrough COVID cases, a rising percent of Tennessee total, health officials say. There we go. Massachusetts, Tennessee, Virginia has statistics reporting breakthrough cases. You know, every state has statistics through their state health department reporting breakthrough coronavirus cases. You think Joe Biden knows that? I think he does. But what's happening now is that this administration is going full steam ahead with vaccine mandates, regardless of the science, regardless of, hey, remember natural immunity, what God gave you to fight diseases? That has just, it's not even part of the discussion any longer. And Americans are getting pretty dang upset about it, especially since the cases keep slapping down the Joe Biden administration's attempt to force vaccinations onto the unvaccinated. This is a pandemic of the unvaccinated, not the vaccinated, the unvaccinated. That's the problem, Joe Biden said. That is a direct quote of what he just said. And his administration is going merrily along, trying to push vaccine mandates in the face of all these court slapdowns. U.S. District Judge Stan Baker, I'm reading from the Daily Caller now, issued a nationwide stay on Biden's vaccine mandate, joining 2 other federal court decisions blocking the mandate from taking effect. The mandate required all federal employees and employees of federal contractors to get the vaccine. That's one refresher course of what's going on in the courts. Here's another, also from the Daily Caller. Missouri Judge Matthew Schlepp issued a temporary injunction on enforcement that impacted 10 states on November 29th. U.S. District Judge Terry Doughty, I think that's pronounced right. It's spelled Doughty, of Louisiana, then expanded that injunction the next day. The decisions also blocked Biden's bid to force businesses with more than 100 employees to enforce a vaccine mandate on their workers. And yet this administration could care less about the courts. They're pushing for more vaccine mandates in the face of science that they're also pushing that they know is a lie. So tell me how this administration has not taken what Barack Obama laid in place as far as pushing this nation over the edge from constitutional, from law and order, to dictatorial. How this administration is not taking that playbook and running it down the field to the end zone rapidly, quickly, before Americans can even fight back, before Americans can even recognize what this administration is doing. My guest today, Jonathan Emord. He is the principal of Emord and Associates, a law firm that really takes on the federal government, engages in civil litigation against the federal government, and they have a remarkable trail of wins. But he is also a best-selling author of several books. I mentioned The Authoritarians earlier. Pick up that copy and check it out. It's a great read. But his most recent, How Biden Stole Christmas, Hanukkah, and Kwanzaa Too. Jonathan, thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. I really appreciate your time.
Well, it's great to be with you.
Your new book, How Joe Biden Stole Christmas, Hanukkah, and Kwanzaa Too. Tell me about it.
Well, I don't think that there's any greater Grinch buffoon combination in real life than Joe Biden. He seems to, like the Grinch, turn everything to ashes that he touches. He's sort of perennially bad news, constantly making the wrong turn. If you had Joe Biden driving, I think he would make fatal mistakes going up the wrong way on one-way streets as a matter of course. It's really remarkable. People talk about how his age and you know his mental state, where he is really suffering from an absence of a connection to the real world. That you know he's likely not to survive his presidency. But when you think about it, he really is more apt to destroy himself just by his own tomfoolery. I mean, he's running about destroying the nation, and in the process, undermining his political survival every minute of every day. So, the book is just poking fun at him in verse, and it's trying to give a little levity to all the Americans who are suffering under the realization that this is the most ruinous presidency in American history.
Yeah, the book, when I saw the cover of it, it reminded me of a Dr. Seuss book. And was that on purpose? Did you take that same sort of prose type of writing? Did you purposely target it for a Dr. Seuss type effect?
Not really. Yes, it is based on the overall idea that Dr. Seuss presented, which is that, you know, you have an evil character who steals a holiday season. But unlike in Dr. Seuss's verse, which is quite a bit different, and real politics in verse, but in a fictional sort of way, and then really pointing out the weaknesses of Joe Biden at every turn. So it's a short book. It's meant for a quick read, and it's really designed to just brighten the holidays for people who love this country and are really fed up with Joe Biden.
Yeah, it's a lot more light-hearted approach to pointing out the pitfalls of the left in America than, say, your last book, The Authoritarians, which was a terrific, well-researched historical account. And I hope people pick up a copy of both those books. But if you had to just sort of sum up what the biggest perils are from this Joe Biden administration right now, what would you name, say, the top three?
Wow. There are so many.
I know. All right, the top 30?
Yeah, I think I would certainly say it is the destruction of the fossil fuel industry and the ruination of the economy. You might say also, throwing into that, inflation, of course. And then I think very clearly socialism and the regular dictatorial violation of the rule of law through mandates from this administration. So, but there's so much. I mean, he abandoned Americans in Afghanistan. He opened the southern borders to endless immigration with no respect for the rule of law. He has supported socialist spending bills. He supported bills to effectively allow illegal immigrants to become citizens through mass amnesty. He's just an extraordinary friend of somebody he's derived a considerable amount of wealth from, Xi Jinping, and more of an enemy of the United States. It's a peculiar situation to see the Bidens, Hunter Biden, Joe Biden, his brother, his family, profiting off of their political office, and now they're continuing to do it even though the president has frequently lost his mind. He's frequently not aware of where he is.
Yeah, peculiar situation.
Terrible, terrible absence of awareness of reality every now and again.
That's a very nice way to term it, because what they're doing outright is destroying America from within, and China is a big partner in that, it seems like. But I really want to get to the vaccine mandates and what's going on in the vaccination world, because you have a very broad background in law and taking on the FDA and so forth. And I'm just curious, what do you think of these latest court rulings slapping back Joe Biden's attempt to force the vaccinations onto the American public?
So I've written several articles for townhall.com which address the vaccine mandates, and at the first word of the mandates, I predicted that they would go down to ignominious defeat under a massive onslaught of litigation, and that's come to pass. But it's not truly, for those of us who are educated in the law and who study these areas, constitutional and statutory areas, it's not a surprise. The reason is that this was so poorly orchestrated by the administration. It is such an overt power grab in violation of the non-delegation doctrine, the separation of powers doctrine, even the Commerce Clause, and then also even the enabling statutes across the board. There is no, at root, there is no federal police power to enable the federal government to perform a mass vaccination program. Since the Jacobson decision, that has been a state power. But in addition to that, there is, even were there a way to suggest that there is such a power in the federal government, it clearly is not an executive power. It's a legislative power. And in the first instance, Biden would have to go to the legislature. Instead, he's relied on sundry agencies to impose the various mandates, and their enabling statutes contain nothing which authorizes United States, district courts and the Fifth Circuit, and over and over and over again, it's just all the same basic analysis. No power is given the president in the Constitution. No power exists by virtue of any statute. The statutory interpretation being visited upon these agencies is illegitimate because it clearly is not authorized. So it's about one of the most overt power grabs in history. It's patently unconstitutional and in violation of these enabling statutes. So he's not getting anywhere, and he won't. I don't think that there's any chance, reasonably speaking, for these mandates to survive, the federal ones.
It is a breath of fresh air to see so much constitutional principle coming out of the courts, especially when you hear weekly of court cases that are conducted more by activist judges and so forth. But there are still concerns that Americans have, and that Americans should have, because if you look at what's been done in the military with the forcing of the vaccinations, and if you look also at what Governor Bill de Blasio is doing in New York, now trying to push vaccinations onto the private sector, those are issues that still hold alarm for Americans, yes?
Oh, yes. The military is a tragic situation because many of those mandates, many of those on individuals in the military are going to stick. And as a result, it's more difficult legally by far to invalidate those coming directly from the commander-in-chief through the military superstructure all the way down to the soldier, and it unfortunately there are areas for challenge. People who have religious scruples against it, people who have medical reasons for not being vaccinated, but it's a much harder argument to make. In the case of de Blasio, I think he's overstepped his bounds. And I do think that his action through the Department of Health could be successfully challenged because it's arbitrary and capricious. If you require employers to vaccinate employees on the notion that somehow that is reducing workplace exposures or improving the environment such that there would be fewer cases of COVID, there simply is no empirical or sound rationale in science to support that determination. The reason why that is because you can't control who comes in and goes out of New York City. Other parts of New York not subject to the mandate, those people interact with people who are subject to the mandate. Companies that are in New York and elsewhere in the state or elsewhere in the nation where the mandates aren't imposed are necessarily frequenting New York, flying in and coming out. So it's both under-inclusive and over-inclusive, and the interaction between the businesses and people will always expose them. And finally, we know that the vaccine itself does not prevent someone from carrying the virus. So you can be vaccinated and still carry the virus. We know that the vaccine wanes in its effectiveness over time, and that is dependent upon each individual's unique medical circumstances and immune system. So that there is not, even if you were to achieve the immunity, the vaccination, there is no assurance of immunity or assurance of diminution in the transmission of the virus or the carriage of the virus in the workplace. So it's not the answer. It's definitely scientifically not the answer, and it's clearly arbitrary and capricious. So I would hope that those challenges will come. I would expect they would come, and I would hope that the courts in New York finally get it right.
Okay, let me finish with this one question, because you yourself say that it's not scientific, it's arbitrary, it's capricious, and I agree with you completely. And yet Democrats keep pushing for it. Jen Psaki keeps insisting that vaccine mandates are necessary and that that the Joe Biden administration that she represents is going to continue to push for them. De Blasio continues to insist that even though critics like yourself, point out the non-scientific aspect of his mandates, that he is going to continue to push for them. So what is it? Because you have a unique perspective fighting government as you have from the legal standpoint for so many years. What is it about Democrats that they keep pushing for this? What is their end game? What do they want to accomplish with vaccine mandates?
Well, they're using this crisis. They would use any crisis as a means to increase substantially their power and control. They don't want you to exercise individual choice. They want you, wherever they can, to do their bidding as they see fit, how this nation should be run, rather than how you see fit in running your own life and living your own life the way you would like. They wish to transplant a limited federal republic with a socialist system, very clearly. And they want to rule over each of us. And they don't like individualism. They despise it. They favor collectivism. That's why they go for a one-size-fits-all vaccine versus what makes full sense, as DeSantis has proven in Florida, an individualized treatment approach instead of a vaccine approach, where the emphasis is on treatment. Because in the end, Florida's in an endemic phase. The rest of the nation will be too. The recent variant, Omicron variant, is an example of the lessening of the virility of the virus. And as a result, we're going to see the world go into an endemic phase. And during that phase, people are going to suffer from vaccine fatigue. They're not going to get vaccinated every 6 months. The numbers being vaccinated are going to drop precipitously. And people are going to look to treatments. And the virus is going to be less virulent. So that's my prediction for the future.
So when you consider vaccine mandates, you have to consider that to Democrats, it's not so much about the mandate or the vaccine itself. It's about the ability to control. It's just a tool to control the people.
You bet.
Jonathan Emord, author of The Authoritarians, which is an excellent book, and now the latest, lighthearted, How Joe Biden Stole Christmas, Hanukkah, and Kwanzaa too. Thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. I really appreciate your time.
You bet. Glad to be with you.
Well, I guess that's Christmas Joe Biden style. Christmas Democrat style. Democrats destroying any freedom you have everywhere they go. How Biden Stole Christmas, Hanukkah, and Kwanzaa too. Pick up your copy, but try not to let reflections on how this administration, how this White House is clamping down on individual freedoms. Try not to let all that awareness destroy Christmas and destroy the true meaning of Christmas, which of course is Jesus' birthday. The recognition of the birth of our Lord and Savior. That's what Christmas is all about. So no matter where you're at in America, no matter what your state of being is, no matter what the news is putting out on a day-to-day basis, it's all just temporary for those who believe in Christ. We know we have a better home to go to one day, and that this, in the end, is just a blink in time. So Merry Christmas. Check out Bold and Blunt at edify.app/podcast, the place to go for all your faith-based podcasts. And in the meanwhile, stay blunt, stay bold.